Hello again and welcome, listeners, to Shallow Thoughts and Deep Shit. My name is Jefferson Lambert, and I'll be your host for this atrocity as I journey through the mind of a serial misanthrope. You can listen to this podcast for free at Spotify, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Radio Public, and Spotify for podcasters. If you like what you hear, please rate the show, subscribe, and follow. You can also follow the show on Instagram, X, Facebook, and YouTube, where you can join for extra content, new episode notifications, and more. Don't forget, you can interact with each episode and post a comment or ask a question if you so desire. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for tuning in. Let's get started, shall we? New Hamburg, New York. New Hamburg, New York is where I call home these days, and it's a great place to live. It has been known as Hood Landing, High Point, and Wappingerville, and it's located on the Hudson River just south of Poughkeepsie and has a population of 793 people. What a great place to call home. This hamlet has changed very little over the past 200 years. My mom and her family used to live here in the late 40s, early 50s, up on the house on the hill at 43 Main Street. That house overlooks the ball field and playground and tennis courts. In the early 1990s, my mom and I moved to New Hamburg and lived at 14 Main Street in the old First Presbyterian Church. Back then, I didn't know the house I lived in was a church, as the steeple was removed a very long time ago. In fact, that church used to be up on the hill overlooking the mouth of the Wappingers Creek until they moved the entire building to where it sits today, overlooking the marina. Also up on that hill is the New Hamburg Cemetery, which a lot of people don't even know exists. I've heard about it since I was a teenager, but never went up there until earlier this year. It was bigger than I thought it would be, with about 200 grave markers. To get there, you have to walk up New Hamburg Road or take the Wappinger Greenway Trail west. It's an eerie little forgotten place with a beautiful view of the creek and the mighty Hudson River. That cemetery marks the graves of some of the early settlers of New Hamburg before they built and started using the Wappingers Falls Rural Cemetery over on West Main Street as you head out of the village of Wappingers. New Hamburg used to be booming with lime burning back in the 1800s and also was home to many mills. In 1820, a lumber yard was built on the site, which is now known as White's Marina. New Hamburg became a port community on the river, with ships loaded and unloaded along nearby Point Street, and then the goods were taken to Poughkeepsie and Wappingers Falls via road. In 1808, John Drake Jr. built a bridge across the Wappingers Creek, and although it's been rebuilt many times over the past 215 years, it's still there today. When I lived here in the 1990s, I worked for one summer at White's Marina at the end of Point Street. It was so nice to leave my house and walk 2 minutes to my job and work outdoors on the river all day long. I worked on boats and did odd jobs around the marina and really had a good time back then. Back then, there used to be a general store next to my house on Main Street, and I'd go there for lunch and see Bill and Kit, the owners. They'd make some good sandwiches, and I'd have my lunches put on my tab and pay them back each payday. The general store and Bill and Kit are now gone, but I have not forgotten. The New Hamburg Yacht Club is down on Water Street and was incorporated on December 20th, 1869, and is the sixth oldest yacht club in the United States. Water Street is very beautiful, and it's always a pleasure to walk down there and take in the scenic views. Over on Point Street is the St. Nicholas Church, a gorgeous Gothic revival building that was constructed in 1902. My grandparents were married there in 1932. The church's interior hasn't been altered since the day it was built. I've never been inside, but its architecture is very pleasing to the eye. Today I live in the house that used to be the old Eagle Hotel. The house was built in the 1800s and I'm sure has a very storied history. I can only imagine the things that used to go on in this building way back when. I'm sure many people were born here and many people have died here as well. My house is on the east side of the railroad tracks, about a 30-second walk to track number 1 of the Metro North Railroad. I remember when I was just a little kid standing at the top of the stairs of the underpass that takes people to the other side of the tracks. That underpass was built in 1930, and before that, there used to be a crossing gate across the tracks that had to be manned by a person back in the day. Anyone who knows me knows that I love trains, and the house I live in has a bird's eye view of the station out front. Between the 3 railroads that share the tracks, there's probably about 60 trains that pass by each day, and it never gets old. On a clear day, I can hear them coming from afar, either from Chelsea to the south or the Pirate Canoe Club in the north, when the engineers warn the traffic at the highway grade crossings with 4C, 2C. 2 longs, 1 short, 1 long. There's nothing like feeling and hearing the General Electric P32 ACDM Genesis 2 dual mode locomotive outside your front door. Speaking of the railroad, construction began on the Hudson River Railroad in 1848, and when it was operational and long before the railroad tunnel was built, trains used to have to stop in New Hamburg, and if passengers wanted to travel further north to Poughkeepsie, they had to detrain and get on a boat and go around to the other side to get on another train to go north. The construction of the 800-foot train tunnel made travel way easier. The tunnel was no longer needed when they eventually blasted the rock and built the tracks a little further west. The tunnel is still there today, gated on both sides, but you can still walk through it if you feel like trespassing. I've done it at nighttime, and it's a little spine-chilling to say the least. Out my bedroom window, I have a view of the Dance Camera generating station located on the west bank of the Hudson in the town of Newburgh. Dance Camera to me has been an iconic landmark since I was a little kid. It was built in the 1950s by Central Hudson Gas and Electric, and it is a plant that produces electricity for New Yorkers. In 1609, Henry Hudson and the crew of the Half Moon anchored just south to the mouth of the Wappinger Creek, and according to their log, witnessed a large gathering of natives singing and chanting feverishly while dancing around a circle of fires. They named the area there Danskamer, which is Dutch for dance chamber. The old railroad bridge just south of New Hamburg is one of my favorite places in the world. I've been going there for more than 40 years now, and I love the atmosphere, the views, the river, the boats, and the trains. It used to be a trestle back when boats needed to sail up the Wappinger Creek, but it has long since been removed. I love that spot there and will continue to go there to relax and enjoy the river in all its beauty. On September 30th, me and a good friend of mine launched a message in a bottle there on the bank of the Hudson. Has anyone seen it yet? In 1871, the train trestle was the site of an awful train accident when a 25-car freight train became disabled after exiting the tunnel. And unfortunately, the Albany-bound Second Pacific Express passenger train collided with it, causing an explosion. 22 people were killed that night in one of the worst accidents in the history of Dutchess County. I'm proud to call New Hamburg my home these days. It's good to be back here again. This town is one of the only station stops along Metro North's Hudson line that is literally untouched throughout the decades. There's a playground, a small park, a marina, a yacht club, a church, and a train station. And that's about it. There are no restaurants, no stores, no gas stations, no post office, and no traffic lights. If it weren't for the railroad, people would barely know this place existed. The views are pretty fantastic, and the people around here are nice. Except for the guy up the street who lets his dog out in the yard to bark relentlessly at nothing for 3 hours a day. You, sir, are a terrible dog owner and an even worse neighbor. Of all the places I've lived in my life, New Hamburg rates somewhere at the top. New Hamburg is where I call home, and I'm glad to be here.